I don't know about you, but I only trust the best. So if you're looking at getting your roof checked out, redone, these are the guys that can help you. Belter Roofing and Construction, they are the best. They'll come out, do a free inspection. You can trust them with your roof. Call them, Belter Roofing and Construction. 405-952-7777. That's Belter Roofing and Construction.
This is the Jake for the State podcast, and this is the call for every red-blooded, God-fearing, liberty-loving patriot to prepare yourself, take your position, stand your ground, and advance the cause of freedom. Let's go.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Jake for the State podcast, and we are continuing the theme of candidate interviews. Of course, it's election season, primaries are coming up, and there's a lot of big races, one including this one, and we have a challenge to the incumbent Congressman Tom Cole, and we're going to get to the one challenging him for the Republican ticket, Mr. Paul Bondar. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Well, thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate it.
You bet. You bet. Well, thanks for coming on. Love to give the people a chance to get to know you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing up to this point.
Well, you know, I'm a Midwesterner, actually, born and raised, and I've traveled all over the United States, and it's been a great educational experience. Was able to go to North Carolina and to play some college football, and I ended up getting into the insurance business, and I ran an insurance business for over 22 years. I realized working with so many business owners, the difficulties and the perils that Americans face each and every day. And especially in the last 4 or 5 years, taking some people through COVID, having people who invested every single ounce of money and sweat equity and passion into their businesses, and seeing them struggling and crying on the phone or crying in person because there's nothing they could do. And I've come to the conclusion that America is just not going in the right direction for most people. And the middle class is being eroded faster and faster. And if you look at the statistics on the Oklahoma government website, it'll actually tell you that the poverty rate in Oklahoma now is 15%. It's actually over 18% for kids. And so when you start looking at the trajectory we're going, and we're spending billions of dollars, I think about 2 weeks ago, within the last 2 weeks, Congress just approved another 60-some billion dollars to go overseas. And personally, right, I feel like we have such a disconnect. Our citizens are here in the country are struggling with inflation. They're struggling. We have an immigration problem. They're struggling just to survive. Senior citizens, so many of the seniors that I have spoken to, they can barely hold on to keeping their homes, and they're deciding whether they're going to put gas in their car or buy the medicine they need or buy groceries. And a lot of times they're cutting back in certain areas, and they're trying to juggle things. But if it keeps going the way it is, Jake, I'm really concerned about, for the average American, how the middle class is going to survive. How are they going to survive? And that's really a really bad thing for our country, for our future, for our kids. And so when you said, well, why are you running? What prompted you to run? I believe it's a multitude of different things. Number one, what I just described. I'm seeing an environment, and I'm seeing our public policy on how we're moving forward is not correcting these issues. I really believe, frankly, that our politicians, our elected officials, frankly, made these issues. And this isn't something like that, they're battling to fix. I think they're responsible, frankly, for most of these problems. I'll give you an example. Everybody knows that inflation is, the definition of it is too many dollars chasing too few goods. Well, we knew that during COVID, that there was going to be an inflationary spike when we printed billions of dollars of money, and we distributed it, and our government leaders distributed all this money, yet our economy was shut down. We couldn't have, I mean, literally, we created inflation similar to if you were to take a pile of brush, put gasoline on it, and then light a match. We created the inflation through that policy. And with the extreme lockdowns and not allowing for money to be exchanged, with the draconian policies that we had during COVID, the inflationary result is most people now, I really don't believe it's low. I think it's worse than what it is. I think most people would agree overall inflation is probably a double digit aspect, where we're probably pushing close to 20% of America's wealth and their buying power has been eliminated. And quite honestly, anybody who knows anything about economics will tell you this is a silent tax. The government just basically took 20% of your buying power off the table. And our policy holders, our elected officials, they went along with that. They promoted that. So they're responsible for that, and they need to be accountable for that. And things like that is where I think we need new direction. I will talk about the border crisis. And the border crisis is something where I think is an absolute, where we're literally shooting a hole in a boat, and we're like acting surprised that there's water coming in. That's the border crisis.
No doubt. You know, Paul, you mentioned the funding for Ukraine, and I want to get into some of the nitty gritty on some of these issues. And since you're running against the incumbent Tom Cole, who's been in now for quite a while, representing District 4, and we can get into that discussion too as to whether or not people in District 4 feel represented in our great republic. Let me just ask that question before we get into some of these bills here. What are you hearing from people in your district, from District 4? Do they feel represented by their representative?
I would say, Jake, the answer to that is no. And that's another reason on why I ran. I think I would say this, if the job was being done, I wouldn't have to interview for the job. That's it.
Right.
If the job was being done, I wouldn't have tossed my hat in the ring. I've talked to thousands of people. I've had people on the phone with me that I've spoken to. I've had them pray with me, for me. Why? Because they feel like they've been abandoned. People have sent in letters. The type of responses they'll get will be a form letter that will come back sometimes 6 months or a year later. These are not my words. This is what the residents are telling me. There's a huge disconnect between the standard of living that we're seeing in CD4 and the will of the people and the will of the constituents and the way that they're being represented. And I think, Washington values and Washington, D.C., basically over time, these people, their values are not necessarily always put first. And I believe that could be evident of what we're seeing here today. And that's why there's some that want to argue for term limits. And I think, there's a lot of merit in looking at term limits because, when you're in a relationship for a long period of time, honestly, sometimes people are good people, but they take other people for granted. Good people sometimes fall into the trap of taking people for granted. And I feel like sometimes there needs to be changes because when you take somebody for granted for too long, that's not a healthy thing. And if you believe in term limits because of whatever your belief might be regarding that, I would just say this: vote term limits. We all have the ability to replace all of Congress every 2 years. Every 2 years, we can make significant changes. Congress has, I believe, like a 9% job rating as far as which jobs across America are considered to be, appreciated, or they think they're doing a good job. 91% of people think they're doing a poor job. So I would just tell people, if that's the case, turn out and vote. Make your vote be heard.
Well, that's it. I think that we either have to have term limits or we have to have a greater voter turnout and a greater interest in the future of our country. And I think the only reason we have this discussion about term limits is because of the dismal number showing up to vote, or prior to showing up to vote, just a lack of engagement and with a populace that's very much uninformed and unengaged until voting day. And then they simply show up and vote for whosever sign they see most of on the way to the voting box. And so this brings up a very interesting conversation I'm having with a lot of candidates, talking about campaign strategy, talking about consultants, and the driving factors behind campaigns. I believe it's a very significant thing where we're having here in the state of Oklahoma the influence of dark money, the influence of consultants who are simply driving campaigns, knowing that they're dealing with an uninformed populace, and all it comes down to is name recognition. Whoever can get the biggest billboard and the most signs out and the most mailers out will be the winner. And obviously an incumbent has the advantage with name recognition. They're hearing and seeing their name in the news all the time. So the assumption is, they're going to show up, vote for the one they're most comfortable with or most familiar with. And this, I believe, is fueling this downward drive of our country as we're getting people reelected by the voters who are very much uninformed and being, I believe, manipulated by the system, the current system. And so one of the things I vowed to do to my listeners and my audience is to ask every candidate, who is your consultant? So I'll do that with you. Paul, who is your consultant?
Okay, so I've hired Roger Stone. And the reason I hired Roger Stone is because I believe he represents good American candidates, and he won't take you on unless he thinks you're a serious candidate. That said, the second part of your question is even more important, Jake. This money that's being provided is my money. Less than 1% of the money that's being put into this race is generated from grassroots people. I'm not bought and paid for. There's no pharmaceutical money coming in. There's no big Washington, D.C. money that's fueling my campaign. There's no large casino money that's hitting me. I'm putting in my money, and I'm obligated then to serve the voters of Oklahoma for CD4. My relationship is not by who's giving me the money. My relationship is I'm free of strings and I'm free of commitments. And more importantly, I've been a businessman for 22 years. And that means I'm coming with a clean slate also. I haven't had a horse trade and sell my soul and do political favors in order to get to this position. The system, you're absolutely right, Jake. The system is designed that a person with an average income is never going to be successful running in this type of in this type of environment. Fortunately for me, I even though I grew up as a relatively, I don't want to say poor, but under a very modest amount of money. My grandfather was a World War II vet. He had a sod farm. I grew up in agriculture. My father was a police officer. So I didn't have very much money growing up, but I opened up a business and I was very successful with this business, which I sold. And the money I generated from the sale of this business is what I'm independently financing this campaign to 99% of all what you're seeing. And I don't think the people have seen or are going to be familiar with seeing a campaign quite like this in CD4 because I have committed the resources to be competitive with the other candidate. And that's my money, and that's because, hey, in business, I always believe you got to do things right, and you don't cut corners. And that's going to be the same approach in this race as well. We're going to do everything the correct way, but we're not beholden. We're not beholden to somebody then, which is very important.
Yeah. I think that does say a lot, honestly, and it's good to hear. There's always this looming question of who's financing this, who's behind it, where's the money coming from, who's actually controlling the candidate? Are they a puppet simply being, controlled by some outside background force? And that's always this question with, no matter you're talking about state politics, local politics, or on the national scale. And, the big question with someone who's been in as long as Tom Cole has is who's in his back pocket, who is he obligated to, what lobbyist has he committed to, and what lobbyist has committed to him. So lots of questions around there. A lot of those things could be easily resolved if they have a chance to get in front of him and ask these questions. I applaud Congressman Burkeen all the time for his his town hall trips, making multiple trips back to his district out in District 2 and, having 18 town halls in 2 days. And I think it's just phenomenal because he's getting in front of the people, letting the people ask questions. So I'm curious about you, thinking about if you were to be elected, what would be the way that you would want to stay connected to and engaged with the people of District 4?
Well, it's not about when I get elected. It starts now. It's already began. And it's not about me making promises. It's about me demonstrating right now with my own actions that that's happening and has happened. And I would say it's not like you run out to the football field. I'm a former college athlete, played a little semi-pro football. I know what it's like to compete. And a real competitor doesn't just show up on a Saturday afternoon and say, I'm here, I'm ready to play. No, you demonstrate that you have been in the gym and you've been working out and you've been running those plays for months prior to. And so when the people that had good people of Sulphur had the tornado, I was there on a Sunday, the next day of, and we took several truckloads of water in, and I had clearance to be able to get in there and see those people and talk to those people and hand out water. And many of them didn't have the resources early in the morning that were necessary. They didn't have water. It was a disaster. So I was there during the tornado disaster. When I'm talking to different people, I'm interviewing them, I'm listening to them. I'm not talking to them just with commercials. And you're going to see some commercials coming up because you're right, you have to show you're legitimate. But I'm also talking with people. I plan to go to every single county that I can and talking to county chairs. I'm going to be in every single county that wants me to come out, and any single person that wants to ask Paul Bondar, wants to ask me any question. I'm not Joe Biden. I'm not going to hide behind a podium and not answer tough questions. Any question that's asked, I'm going to answer it. And I want to have a conversation. And so I've already done a number of these types of things, Jake, where I believe having a dialogue with people so I understand what are their issues. And I've talked to thousands of people in the district already. Thousands, tens of thousands. That means that I'm prepared for this job. By the time the election comes on June 18th, I will be more connected and have a better understanding of what the main issues and the challenges that people are facing than anybody. And I believe that that's what it takes. And that's just me explaining what I'm doing, but it's really about doing it.
Yeah, no doubt. I recently interviewed Larry Murray and Charity Lynch, who were elected as the RNC chairman and chairwoman, and also stay in close contact with Chairman Dom and Vice Chair Wayne Hill. There's lots of issues we can talk about, the unity issue about the Republican Party in the state. Won't go there right now, but one of the primary objectives and priorities on their agenda, they all speak about holding their elected officials to the party platform. And so running as Republicans, what does that mean? So I'll ask you, what does that mean to you to be a Republican?
Well, I think Ronald Reagan said it best. At the end of the day, we have to remember that we agree on probably 80% of the issues. And I do agree that we have a division within the Republican Party. And when I get involved here, even at this point, while we have differences that I think are important that we're going to need to contrast, we have to contrast those differences. We have to remember that the bigger fight is really not about us as Republicans. It's about figuring out how do we get on the same page and be on the unified and the same team holistically. And we do have a fracturing of the Republican Party. I'm hearing this all over the place. And we do need to heal that because we have to remember our job as an elected official is, number one, to serve the American people. That's job number one. And that means that sometimes we're going to have to set egos aside. And I know there's some people out there, and the big issue with the Republican Party right now is that is regarding a lot has to do with the brand. And that brand is Donald Trump. Either you like him or you don't like him. But I would just say this. I would say we have to remember that the goal is always to serve the American people first. And number two, the Republican Party needs to galvanize and be a party that wins elections across the United States. I'm sick and tired of Democrats winning in elections that they have no business to ever win. And especially in 2022, the results that we've seen in this country where we did not have this, I would not even call it a red wave. We won a little bit, but we actually lost ground in many areas. That was not a successful situation given the horrendous job that the Biden administration was doing. And I would say the Republican Party needs to introspectively take a hard look at themselves, and we need to say, hey, who are we? And let's put our egos aside. Let's start working together. And even though we disagree on certain issues, and I do disagree with certain issues with Mr. Cole, at the end of the day, we're all Republicans. And so whoever wins at the end of the day, we're going to rally behind that person, and we're going to collectively work to get the best result for the American. And that's what needs to be remembered. And we need to put some of this infighting aside, and we need to galvanize. And so very much I do agree with you. I'm hearing that's a common theme. And we have to put prosperity ahead of and progress in progressing our message to the American people above individual feelings. So.
Yeah, no doubt. And I appreciate your perspective on the unity. I do want to ask that one more time just to get clarity on what it means to you to be a Republican. And because I know that the people are concerned. I'm hearing from people all across the state saying, hey, it's easy to run with an R beside your name, but when you get into office and you start voting like a Democrat, we got a problem. And then it's tough getting you out. And so people want to know, you say you're a Republican. What does that mean to you?
You got a backbone in your body or not? That's what it means. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it and speak not like I'm a businessman, not a politician. I'm disgusted. I hate to say it, but I'm disgusted when people are just like weak paper tents and they just fold. Being a Republican means that you have to stand up for something for a change. And we do have good people like that. But you know what? Courage is not about being afraid. And I know there's intimidation and there's all types of things that happen in Washington because they want to have their Washington swamp DC ways, and they don't like people to stand in the way of those agendas. I get that. But at the end of the day, I had two grandfathers that enlisted into World War II, and one of them was awarded, he was in some very major battles. It took courage. Our men and women that go and fight for this country takes courage. The family members that are left behind when the members of the armed forces go fight for this country takes courage for them too. It's sacrifice. And I think our Republicans need to remember the sacrifice that so many for 200 plus years made for freedom in this country, and stop selling us out. Stop folding. Stop doing what's easy. Stop sending billions of dollars that doesn't really necessarily help Americans, but you justify it and you wrap it in some sort of cocoon and say, this is freedom money. Well, no, we're disconnected. Why are we not using this money to finish to address the immigration crisis? And why are we not using this money to help with the situation with the poverty that we're having here? And they're going to justify things, and people can rationalize things however they want. But I think Americans are smart enough to see, if I drew a line down this table, it's as simple as either you're working for me or you're working against me. As Abraham Lincoln said, of the people, by the people, for the people, right? And I think actually by the people, of the people, for the people. But our government right now, our government is not working for the people. It's working, I think most people would agree, against the people. And we pay taxes for almost 6 months of the year before we finally take a dollar home. And then we find out that we just got to keep working longer and longer. And Social Security's in danger and all these things.
Well, let's look at a few issues to get your take on these, to give people an idea of where, if you were currently in Congress, how you would be voting on these. You mentioned it at the start of the interview. I'll circle back around to that. But the funding for Ukraine, and of course, we want to look at Israel as well. But, we're seeing billions of dollars. I think 60 billion is the last check we're writing to Ukraine. Is this something that you would put your name on? And if not, why?
Not the way it is right now, because I'm tired of America. I'm tired of it being a feudal system where our tax dollars just get shipped overseas and there's no recourse, where our national debt keeps growing out of control and our kids have absolutely no chance to probably ever pay this debt back. And at some point, we're going to bankrupt the country. And I'm getting to the point where I wonder if that's not the design or the intent of some of this out of control spending. I think I see some of these actions that our government officials are making, and I wonder, are they this disconnected? Do they not see that if they just keep letting the boat drift by the waterfall, eventually the boat's going to fall over the waterfall? Are they rooting to break the currency here almost? Is it, like the border that they leave open deliberately, and the inflation and the money that they printed deliberately to create a silent tax? So I'm tired of these types of radical type policies of negligence. And I guess I would say this, Jake, very clearly. What's wrong with the rest of the world chipping in for a change? Why is it always on the back of the American taxpayer?
No doubt.
All the big globalists that are in the World Economic Forum, they're already not going to like me because they get up every day and all they talk about is social justice, which means putting their boot on the throat of the American and not letting us drill our natural resources, coming up with all this climate change and telling us that we need to work till we're 70. And by the way, let's reduce the world's population while we're at it. So what we're really up against is not Democrats and Republicans. What we're up against people from overseas that don't really value our sovereignty and value America having prosperity. And I guess, in the old days, the way countries would work is they would loan, if you need somebody, the message that's going to come back is, but Paul, these people need your help. Hey, God bless. I want to help people too. But why do we have to always do it for free? Why can't these be structured loans that come back and get repaid at some point to repay America? Why is it always for free?
Yeah.
And why don't we have other nations chipping in? Why is it always mainly us carrying the lion's share of everything? It just doesn't seem right to me. It seems like a redistribution of wealth rather than us helping. That's what it seems like to many Americans also.
Well, along with Ukraine, obviously, the top of the headline is Israel and our number one ally. And we see this kind of waffling with the Biden administration, halfway supporting them. But when Israel is wanting to advance and and go into Rafah right now, then there's a call for peace and call for a ceasefire and questions about whether we will send them the appropriate weapons to do what they need to do. And so, where would you stand in this conflict, in standing with Israel? Would you vote to continue to back them in their pursuit of the annihilation of Hamas, or would you not? Would you want to take a more reserved approach? Where would you stand on this?
Well, the first thing before I say that, the first thing I will say is we never had, whether people like Trump or not, we never had these problems with his leadership. And the Biden leadership for foreign policy, if you're even thinking about voting Democrat this year in the elections, I would take a hard, fast look at this. We did have peace in the Middle East with our prior president. And whether you don't like some of his Twitter tweets, we had a very, very controlled world stage. And things right now with the Biden administration are completely in turmoil and havoc. And this is just one more example. I believe that America should stand with Israel. I'm not. That being said, I don't want to be a hawk that sticks my nose aggressively in each and every conflict. I believe in supporting allies when needed, but I also say, hey, we're not gonna fight everybody's wars for them, if that makes sense. And so I do believe that Israel needs to be supported. I do believe that at the end of the day, the right things need to happen. But I don't believe in us getting into and perpetuating more conflict and us sending a lot of troops over there at some point. Who knows how this could escalate? And at this point, I don't think we're there. But I don't believe in America necessarily being the world's policeman, if that makes sense. And I think so. I think it's a difficult situation. I really do. I think in some of these situations, it's not necessarily where one side is 100% right and the other side is 100% wrong. There's elements of where both sides can, and that's why we have some of these protests. But as a general rule, I think you have to, Jake, we have to stand with Israel, and I can certainly understand and sympathize with why they're responding at times the way they do, because of how they feel. So, yeah.
When you say they, are you talking about the protests?
Israel, the folks in Israel, I can understand.
Israel.
I can understand why Israel feels this way. They've been attacked, and
Yeah.
so it's hard to put yourself in somebody else's mind. I'm trying to, I try my best to wear other people's shoes and to do that, but I also don't want to speak for people at the same time as well. And you know, this is something where I believe, the Bible says America can't turn its back on Israel. I think that there's we need to keep that in consideration to some degree, right? And we also have to look at overall a matter of right and wrong in this situation. But that doesn't mean America taking on another war implicitly and us going in that direction. And so we got to be smart how this world stage plays out. That's why it's very important to have proper leadership. That's why we really need folks to come out, and we need to replace the Biden administration, because
No doubt.
this has been a complete disaster. And from day one, public policy has taken a huge step back once the Biden administration had assumed power. Let's put it that way.
Right. Right. Speaker Johnson is getting a lot of criticism lately. Of course, we went through the back and forth just trying to find a new speaker. He was elected, a lot of celebration by conservatives because of his voting record. And now it seems that, the criticism is that he's voting more in line with the Democrats. He's getting a lot more Democrat votes. And is he catering, trying to walk a middle ground line? And so I'm hearing perspectives from both sides, but we have loud voices like Marjorie Taylor Greene calling for his replacement, as did Matt Gaetz before with McCartney. And so what do you think about Speaker Johnson and his current voting record? I mean, you can look at Ukraine, Israel, the FISA Act. And is this a speaker you could get behind, or would you also want to see him replaced?
Well, I think we have to. I agree with all that. I mean, in the fact that I had very high hopes for Speaker Johnson as well, and we've seen him, somewhat sway towards more of a DC policy, and that's somewhat concerning. That being said, I think it also can be. We have to somehow find a way to work together. And if we can get enough other members of Congress to galvanize, and we can get folks like myself and other folks in that can that can be a beacon, or that can kind of sway the policy a little bit more, maybe that will have some effect. I don't necessarily agree with removing a speaker, every couple months. I think that could be a dangerous, slippery slope. And so I appreciate what some of the other representatives are saying, and their fervent desire to want to have America First policies. I want to have America First policies. I think we're all in agreement on that. But we somehow got to start talking to each other and opening up channels of communication like the founding fathers of this country and our Constitution. They would lock themselves in a room and they would debate issues so everybody could get on the same page. I'm not sure if we're having that level of dialogue. And I think instead what we're doing, instead of members of Congress talking to each other, they're talking mainly through media, Jake. And I think that this is a fundamental problem that we have, similar to earlier with the district. When you talked about our current representative not connecting and talking with the people, I'm concerned that the folks in Congress are talking mainly through media, as opposed to really trying to reach out and talk to each other and resolve some of these differences. I think if we keep removing speakers of the House, I'm concerned that we're fighting too much as a party. But that said, I also believe we have to stick with our morals and our values, and we have to be strong as Republicans. So this is a very difficult dilemma. And I think what we need to start doing is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting for things to change. That is a definition of insanity. So we need to get some fresh leadership, and we need to get some fresh ideas, and we need to start approaching things differently. If we keep ramming our heads against the walls and saying, I just can't break through, I'm not getting anywhere, well, then it's time that we start looking for a door. And it's time that maybe somebody picks up a phone. I can't speak to what everybody has done to talk to Speaker Johnson. I don't know what conversations have had and have not taken place. I would just say what I would do is I would continue to express that as a leader and a representative for Congressional District 4 in Oklahoma. My job is to put Oklahomans first. My job is to take care of their interests, number one, and to be steadfast on that. And I just believe if more Congress people, if they would be steadfast and they would remain diligent in saying, we need to take care of our constituency, we need to take care of our taxpayer, we need to take care of our voter, much like the founding fathers did when we set this country up. If we would go back to that and we would just remember why we're there, we can then shape some policy that is more reflective of those types of outcomes. And us screaming on camera and those types of things, I don't think are going to build bridges. I think they're going to build walls within the party. And so, again, I can't speak, and I'm not here to criticize everybody. I'm here to talk about what I would do differently. And what I would do differently is I would reach out and I would try to work with people, but that doesn't mean work weekly. That doesn't mean work, mildly. It means I'm going to work with people, but I'm going to stay very steadfast and I'm going to stay very fervent to my ideas and ideals that defend the American people's interest.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think that the shifting back and forth with new speakers is problematic, especially in an election year as consequential as the one we're in. I'll end with this, Paul. What makes you the best candidate? What are the differences between you and incumbent Congressman Tom Cole, and why should people vote for you?
I think, again, if I was to draw a line down the table and list my attributes, I would say this. I'm coming in I'm financing my campaign. I don't behold to anyone except for the voters in the district. I'm a father of two. I have two young children I worry about just the same as I do for others. And other people who can't stand, I want to stand with them and for them because I do love this country. I had two grandfathers, as I said, that served in this country. They gave 4 years of their life, 3.5 years of their life to go and defend this country. I have a father that served as a police officer in this country, was injured on duty, came back and finished his 25 years of service out for his department. I believe in a country that allows for upward mobility. I believe in freedom. I believe in citizen sovereignty. I believe that we should not be taxed to death. I believe that we should have the right to bear arms. And I don't believe in draconian government that gets in the face and tries to mandate things that Americans do with their lives, with their freedoms and their civil liberties. That's a core belief. I don't believe others necessarily share these beliefs. And if they do, they go to Capitol Hill and those beliefs die. And they stop remembering the folks that they're there to defend and support. And we can see it by some of the policies that have been voted recently by my opponent. I'm very disappointed that Congress recently voted for a bill, and if you look into it, certain passages within the Bible now are considered to be hate speech. I can't believe this. Hate speech. The Bible, certain passages are now considered to be in the Bible hate speech. This is unacceptable. This is a slippery slope. At what point is the entire Bible going to be considered hate speech? This is an attack that we have on American freedom. And I'm not going to stand for this. Maybe our current representative is. He voted for it. I'm not going to vote to have passages within our Bible be hate speech. It's completely unacceptable. We talk about FISA. FISA allows for the government to spy in Americans' in your homes. We all know when you talk about something and all of a sudden Facebook has something pop up, we all know we're getting spied on. Thank your local congressman for some of the tools of surveillance. If you like privacy, well, maybe you want to vote for me. I don't believe that the government should be doing surveillance to the extent that it is. That's another one. I don't believe that we should be putting Americans last. That's a third one. I don't believe that we should be the world's policeman and we should be sending all of our money across shores. There's another one. I don't believe that we should have open borders that we pretend to be closing and in the name of huge corporations having it be on the taxpayer's dime. And meanwhile, our kids in certain parts of the country, schools are filled with refugees. I'm sorry, I feel bad for these refugees. But when are they going to start solving the problem in their country? When are they going to stand up to their failed governments? Why is it always on the burden of the American people? Because Amazon wants to have cheap labor and they want to bust them in by the plane full, and it's on the back of the taxpayer. These are self-inflicted wounds. It's sabotage that we have by poor leadership. And it's time for somebody to actually address them and have the courage to say, these are the issues that we have. They're not mysterious on how to solve. We can solve them together. And we need to start working together to solidify and unify the Republican Party to start fixing these issues once and for all for the American people. Because I believe that these problems can be fixed if we want to fix them. So that is the real big, that would be my answer. And just do your research as a voter and look at what I believe in. I'm a 22-year businessman, 44 years old. I'm coming in with a clean slate, and I care about this country, and I don't owe anybody right now. I don't owe anybody any favors. And guess what? If I get corrupted on D.C., like many people do in the swamp, guess what deserves to happen to me then too? I need to get voted out then down the road if that happens to me. That's what the American system needs to be. And that's a system of accountability.
Yeah, and I was asked the same thing. I was asked, how can we ensure that you won't go up and be corrupted? And I said, you can't. Anybody has the potential to be corrupted. And I can't promise you. I mean, there's nothing I can say to you that would convince you that I'll never be corrupted. But hey, we have a system in place that if indeed someone is corrupted, you can get them out on the next election cycle. And so very, very true. I appreciate your words, Paul. I'm in your district, and so I'll be casting my vote. And it's really good to hear. I appreciate everything you said. I'm in agreement. And, I have yet to hear from Representative Cole, Congressman Cole, and I'd love to get him an interview as well. But it is concerning whenever you can't get in touch with your representative who's supposed to be representing you. But I'm going to persist, and we'll see what happens. In the meantime, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you throwing in your hat to run for this race. And I think you got a lot of good things to offer. So I'm excited about getting this podcast out. Be sure, guys, if you're listening, be sure to like and subscribe and share and tell everyone about it. Paul, to end this, how can people get a hold of you and learn more about your campaign?
www.electbondar.com. Go to our website, and we have contact information. I tell you what, I'll also give out my direct line, 405-906-8243. Why am I giving out our direct line phone number? Because if you got an issue and you want to call, I'm here to talk to you. Again, it goes back to what I said earlier. I'm going to be the best prepared congressman ever as far as understanding the issues that the people have. The people have not had a voice, and they've not had a direct connection for a very long time. In 2024, much of the problems change. This ends now. We move forward. We're going to unite. We're going to fix the problems. We're going to listen to the folks of the district in Oklahoma. And that's what I'm pledging to do. And that's why I'm providing this contact information. And Jake, thank you so much for this interview. God bless you.
You bet.
You know what? We're picking up tremendous momentum on this. And I believe that, at the end of the day, it's simple. If people want more of the same, then vote the same way you've been voting, if you're happy with your government. But to your question of why should they consider voting for us, I think if you never change, that is the definition of insanity if you expect the outcomes to be different. And we bring a lot of American first policies to play that's going to benefit the people within the district. And again, I'm concerned about them. I'm concerned about it because I remember when I was a youngster growing up and I didn't have much money, and in an agricultural type environment, I realized how things were, and a lot of people are really stressed, and I want to try to help them out and help our country out by not having things erode and having our freedoms in the Bible now. The Bible, Jake, the Bible is considered verses in the Bible now hate speech. It's too
very concerning. Yeah, Paul, I appreciate your time. I'll post the website and your phone number and the show link so people can find it there. And guys, you've heard from him. And also, I've got you scheduled, Paul, for the upcoming radio show on 96.9. You can always catch me there in the morning, Monday through Friday, 7 to 8 a.m. on 96.9. You can also find it at freedom969.com. But, Paul, I appreciate your interview and your time today. And now the people have heard from you, and they're more informed to make the right vote. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure, again, to like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you next time on the Jake for the State podcast.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you.
All right, Paul, you bet, man. And, I think that,